Right now in Boise, Idaho, inside a building called the National Interagency Coordination Center, dispatchers are looking at a map of the United States that hasn't looked this bad in years. 94 separate large wildfires are burning across the country at this exact moment, none of them contained, all of them actively demanding resources that are running out. The federal government has already done something it's only done a handful of times in the last decade. It raised the national wildfire preparedness level to 5 out of 5, the absolute maximum on the scale, meaning there are more fires burning right now than the country has people and equipment to fully fight. Firefighting crews from Australia and New Zealand have already been flown in to help. Air Force Reserve planes are dropping retardant. And peak fire season, the worst stretch of the year, has barely even started. Today we're going to lay out exactly where things stand across the entire country right now, what preparedness level 5 actually means for you even if you don't live anywhere near an active fire, and which specific fires are driving this crisis. No exaggeration, just the current numbers straight from the agencies tracking this in real time. If you want to keep following this as it develops, subscribe and turn on notifications, because this situation is changing by the day. A thumbs up helps this reach more people who need accurate information right now. Let's get into it. Let's start with the number in the title, because it's not an exaggeration, it's close to exact. According to the most recent Incident Management Situation Report, published by the National Interagency Coordination Center on the morning of August 5th, 2026, firefighters across the United States are currently working to contain 94 uncontained large fires simultaneously. In the 24 hours before that report was published, 97 new fires were reported nationwide, including 3 brand new large fires, while crews managed to fully contain 3 others. That's the reality of fighting wildfires at this scale right now. It's not a fixed number sitting still, it's a number that's climbing and falling by the day, hovering right around that 90 to 100 range, with new fires igniting almost as fast as existing ones get contained. To handle those 94 large fires, more than 28,700 personnel are currently assigned to incidents across the country. Stop and actually picture that number for a second. That's not a battalion. That's not a large city's entire police force. That's closer to the population of a small American town, entirely made up of firefighters, support crews, incident commanders, and logistics personnel, all currently deployed specifically to fight fire, spread out across dozens of separate incidents from the Pacific Northwest to the Southwest to the Northern Rockies. And according to the same report, so far in fire year 2026, firefighters have responded to 45,184 individual wildfires that have burned more than 4 million acres across the United States. For context on what that acreage actually represents, that's an area larger than the entire state of New Jersey, burned since the start of this fire year, and we are only in the first week of August. Here's the part of this story that deserves the most attention, because it explains why this crisis matters even if you personally live nowhere near an active fire. On July 18th, 2026, the National Interagency Fire Center raised the country's wildfire preparedness level to level 5, the highest point on a 1 to 5 scale specifically designed to track resource availability, not just fire danger. At the time that decision was made, the country was already working to contain 78 large, uncontained fires, with nearly 21,000 personnel deployed nationwide. Since that declaration, both the number of large fires and the personnel required to fight them have continued climbing, reaching the 94 fires and 28,700 personnel we're seeing right now. It's worth understanding exactly what preparedness level 5 means, because it's a genuinely different situation than most people assume when they hear the word wildfire on the news. The National Multi-Agency Coordination Group establishes these preparedness levels throughout the year specifically to make sure wildland firefighting resources are ready to respond to new incidents as they arise. At level 1, the lowest tier, fire danger nationwide is minimal, and there's little or no commitment of national resources because local and regional crews can handle what's happening on their own. As you move up the scale, more and more federal and state personnel and equipment become mobilized and available for deployment anywhere in the country. Level 5, the top of that scale, means something specific and serious. It means firefighting resources, personnel, aircraft, engines, incident management teams are so heavily committed nationally that there may not be enough left to fully address every new fire the moment it starts. Michael Johnson, a public information officer for a volunteer fire department in South Dakota, described what Level 5 actually feels like on the ground for local agencies far from the biggest fires. He explained that at this level, resources are heavily committed nationally, and fire departments in areas without active fires of their own can experience what's called a drawdown, meaning their own local equipment and personnel may get pulled away and sent to higher need regions elsewhere in the country, leaving their home area with less coverage than usual, even if no fire is currently burning nearby. Lenore Lamb, a supervisor with the Ottawa National Forest, who was reassigned to help manage fires in northern Minnesota, put it simply. At level 5, she said, It becomes a little bit more difficult to get the resources you need because there's so much fire activity happening simultaneously across the country. Federal resources, firefighters, logistics specialists, financial coordinators, all of it starts getting triaged specifically toward the fires where the need is considered greatest, which means fires that might normally receive a certain level of federal support could end up waiting longer or receiving less, simply because everything is being pulled toward wherever the danger is judged to be most severe at that moment. This isn't a rare or unprecedented step, but it's also far from routine. According to reporting from Time, the National Interagency Fire Center has only declared Level 5 preparedness a handful of times over the last decade, previously reaching this threshold in July of 2018, July of 2021, and July of 2024. The fact that the country has now hit Level 5 again this year, and did so in the same general window, mid to late July, as several of those prior instances, reflects a broader pattern meteorologists and fire officials have been tracking, that the period from mid-July through August has increasingly become the point where national fire activity peaks hard enough to overwhelm existing resource capacity. Chris Clements, a reporter who has covered this story closely, noted that in one sense this situation is fairly typical for the time of year. It's almost August, prime time for fire season nationally. What makes this particular year notable isn't that Level 5 was reached, it's how early and how sharply fire activity climbed to get there and how many separate, large, resource-intensive incidents are burning simultaneously rather than one or two dominant megafires absorbing most of the national attention. Even if you don't live anywhere near one of these 94 fires, there's a specific reason this still affects you, and it has nothing to do with resource allocation. Smoke doesn't respect state lines or fire perimeters. As wildfires burning in Canada demonstrated earlier this same summer, smoke from a major fire can travel thousands of miles from its source, meaningfully degrading air quality for people who have never seen so much as a flame. Much of the country has been sitting under dry, hot conditions this summer, exactly the kind of atmospheric pattern that allows smoke plumes to drift long distances and settle over communities far removed from the actual fire lines. If you've noticed hazy skies, a smell of smoke with no visible fire nearby, or unusually poor air quality readings recently, even hundreds of miles from any of these incidents, there's a real chance it's connected to this exact national fire situation. Officials specifically recommend using tools like AirNow, Gov to track real-time air quality and smoke conditions in your specific area, rather than relying on whether you can visually see or smell smoke, since fine particulate matter from distant fires can significantly affect air quality even when it isn't obviously noticeable. Now let's get specific about where the largest, most resource-intensive fires are actually burning right now, because this national number, 94 large fires, isn't spread evenly across the country. It's concentrated heavily in a handful of regions currently absorbing the overwhelming majority of personnel, aircraft, and incident management teams. The single largest active fire in the country right now is the Big Grass Fire, straddling the border of southeastern Oregon and southwestern Idaho. As of the most recent update on August 5th, the Big Grass Fire has burned approximately 346,878 acres and sits at just 25% containment. To put that acreage in perspective, this single fire has already burned an area larger than the city of Los Angeles. It was first reported on July the 23rd, meaning it has been actively burning and growing for nearly 2 weeks straight, with firefighters continuing to work to slow its spread as it burns rapidly across the terrain of Malheur County, Oregon. The National Interagency Fire Center has confirmed that containment remains limited, specifically because crews are prioritizing protecting communities and critical infrastructure over attempting to fully surround a fire of this scale immediately. Level 3, meaning immediate go evacuation orders, remain in effect for the communities of Pleasant Valley, South Mountain, and Jordan Valley, driven specifically by road closures the wildfire itself has caused, with residents instructed to evacuate using Pleasant Valley Road toward Jordan Valley before continuing north on U.S. Highway 95 to get clear of the fire's path. Not far away, in Washington State's Okanogan County, the Sinlahecan Fire has burned 117,078 acres as of August 6th, after being first reported on July 26th, meaning it has been actively growing for 10 straight days. This fire adds directly onto what was already, as we've covered in prior updates, one of the most severe wildfire seasons in Washington State's modern history, with Governor Bob Ferguson having already declared a statewide state of emergency and burn ban due to the combination of record drought, unusually high temperatures, and dangerous winds fueling fires across the state, including the devastating Spokane area fires that crossed directly into residential neighborhoods within city limits just days earlier. The Sinlahecan Fire represents yet another major, resource-demanding incident layered onto a state that was already stretched thin, fighting a dozen other large fires simultaneously. The scale of the international and federal response being mobilized for the Northwest specifically illustrates just how serious officials consider this region's fire activity right now. According to the most recent Incident Management Situation Report, a 15-member incident management team, along with 59 fire line management personnel, have been flown in from Australia and New Zealand specifically to support large fires burning in the northwest area of the United States. This is not a routine or symbolic gesture. International mutual aid agreements for wildland firefighting exist precisely because fire seasons in the Southern Hemisphere and Northern Hemisphere are offset by 6 months, meaning experienced Australian and New Zealand crews are often available to deploy to the United States during the peak of the American fire season, and vice versa. Bringing in dozens of international personnel, specifically for the Northwest region, confirms that this area is currently one of the most resource-strained parts of the entire national firefighting effort. On top of that international support, 2 MAFs C-130 air tankers, along with their support personnel from the 302nd Airlift Wing of the Air Force Reserve based in Colorado, have been deployed specifically to Klamath Falls, Oregon, adding military aerial firefighting capacity directly into a region already absorbing a significant share of the country's available resources. It's also important to understand the broader national picture behind this crisis, because the fires burning right now aren't happening in a vacuum separate from the rest of the year. Back in January of 2026, the National Interagency Fire Center issued its National Seasonal Fire Outlook, and that forecast specifically projected above normal wildfire risk for much of Texas, Florida, Georgia, the Carolinas, and the broader southeastern United States, a signal that fire risk this year wasn't expected to be confined to the traditional western fire belt. Officials have noted that firefighting efforts throughout 2026 have already required record mobilization of personnel and resources, with incident management teams, ground crews, and aerial firefighting assets extensively deployed to manage numerous fires across multiple regions well before this current Level 5 designation was even reached. Earlier in the year, a major fire burned through Florida's Big Cypress National Preserve over several weeks in February and March, consuming more than 35,000 acres, requiring a voluntary evacuation of the community of Jerome and causing damage exceeding $4.5 million in fire suppression costs alone. A reminder that this year's fire activity has been geographically widespread and persistent for months, not a single sudden late summer surge. There's a broader explanation behind why fires this year have grown so large so quickly across so many different regions, and it comes down to the same basic physical ingredients meteorologists point to every fire season, just present in unusually reinforcing combination this year. Low relative humidity in some areas, dropping as low as 4 to 10%, according to the most recent National Fire Weather Forecast, dramatically increases how receptive dry vegetation is to ignition and rapid spread. High winds, with gusts recently reaching 20 to 30 miles per hour along the Sierra Front and across the Great Basin and into southwest Wyoming, don't just push flames forward. They loft burning embers well ahead of a fire's main body, a process called spotting, capable of starting entirely new ignitions hundreds of yards or more from the original fire line. Steep terrain accelerates fire spread further since flames traveling uphill preheat the vegetation above them before ever reaching it, and drought-stressed or dead vegetation, the direct product of the kind of prolonged multi-state drought conditions that triggered Washington's statewide emergency, and that have been building across much of the West for months, ignites and burns far more intensely than healthy, moisture-retaining plant material. When a genuine dry spell, a strong wind event, cured grass or brush, and a spark all align simultaneously, and this year they have aligned simultaneously across multiple regions at once rather than just one, fires are capable of growing from a handful of acres to tens of thousands within a single day. The current national forecast makes clear this pattern isn't easing up in the immediate term either. Predictive Services, the forecasting arm that supports the National Interagency Fire Center's resource allocation decisions, is calling for another day of hot, dry, and windy conditions across much of the West, with low relative humidity, gusty winds, and temperatures approaching 100 degrees Fahrenheit across portions of the Northwest, alongside continuing extreme heat spanning California. The Great Basin, the Southwest, and the Southern Plains, all of which are expected to support continued elevated fire potential. Isolated dry thunderstorms, storms capable of producing lightning without meaningful rainfall to accompany it, remain possible across northern New Mexico and southern Colorado, a specific and serious concern for fire officials, since lightning-caused ignitions in already tinder-dry landscapes are one of the most common ways entirely new large fires begin with no advance warning at all. So what does all of this actually mean for you, depending on where you're watching this from? If you live in or near any of the regions currently hosting large uncontained fires, the Pacific Northwest, the Great Basin, the Northern Rockies, California, or the Southwest, the guidance remains consistent with what we've covered in prior updates on individual fires. Follow official evacuation orders immediately and without hesitation, since Level 3 GO designations, like the ones currently active around the big grass fire in Oregon and Idaho, exist specifically because officials believe there may not be time to wait. Check resources like the National Interagency Fire Center's INSEE portal and your local county emergency management office directly for the most current, verified information on any fire near you, rather than relying on secondhand reports circulating on social media. If you live somewhere that feels far removed from all of this, the message is still relevant to you, just in a different form. Smoke from fires burning hundreds or even thousands of miles away can and does affect air quality far beyond any individual fire's immediate perimeter. So checking a tool like Air Now. GOV during periods of heavy national fire activity is a genuinely useful habit, especially for anyone with respiratory conditions, young children, or elderly family members in the household. And understand that Preparedness Level 5 isn't an abstract bureaucratic designation. It reflects a real current strain on the country's firefighting capacity, meaning that if a new fire starts anywhere in the country right now, including possibly near you, the resources available to respond to it immediately may be more limited than they would be during a normal lower activity fire season. This is also, fundamentally, a story about how thin the line has become between having enough capacity to respond to the unexpected and not having enough. 94 large fires, more than 28,700 personnel, international crews flown in from the other side of the planet, military aircraft redirected to support civilian firefighting efforts, all of it running simultaneously. At the exact moment forecasters say peak fire season is only just beginning to hit its stride. That's the honest current state of wildfire risk across the United States as of this recording. Not exaggerated for effect, but drawn directly from the same situation. Reports federal agencies themselves are using right now to decide where the next available fire engine, the next available aircraft, and the next available incident management team actually gets sent. We'll keep tracking this national fire situation as conditions continue to develop, including any further changes to the preparedness level and updates on the largest individual fires currently driving this crisis. Subscribe so you don't miss those updates as this story continues to unfold through the peak of the season. If you're in an area currently affected by wildfire smoke or an active fire near you, please follow official guidance directly and drop a comment letting me know what conditions look like where you are right now. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.